Hello, happy Thanksgiving or happy Thursday, depending on where you are, what you're doing, how you feel about this holiday. Um, I have spent multiple hours of the past 24 watching The Last Waltz. I think I'm up to the third time, about halfway through right now, and paused because I've been thinking today that a few years ago I had a piece published about the about Thanksgiving in St. Louis in 2014. And it occurred to me today that maybe I should or could, there's no should about it, maybe I could read this and post it. And if anybody wants to watch, they can. Uh, this piece is called Caravan Waltz, and it was published in the St. Louis Anthology by Belt Publications. And I'm still super, super geeked that I have a piece in this book with a lot of really awesome writers. Um, it focuses on one particular Thanksgiving uh, after a very long depression in which I was shaken out of my house, figuratively speaking. We didn't have an earthquake that year. Um, and what shook me out was partially The Last Waltz and some of the messages that come from it. And since this year we're not able to gather, you should be home. I'm home. Hope you're home too. Having a very quiet day. It's been a good occasion to reflect and also to miss the fact that even though I don't make it every year, that there's a group of people in St. Louis who do their own version of The Last Waltz the night before Thanksgiving. And that's partially what made me think maybe I should read this because we don't get to gather and all sing along to the Wait and Up on Cripple Creek and all that good stuff. So, anyway, I will cut right to it. For those of you who don't know, The Last Waltz refers to the final concert of the band in 1976 on Thanksgiving night. And Martin Scorsese filmed the concert, turned it into possibly the greatest concert film of all times. One of my Thanksgiving traditions is watching it, sometimes multiple times, like this year. So, anyway, I'll share a little bit of it with you here. Caravan Waltz. In 2014, it snowed the day before Thanksgiving in St. Louis. Big, fluffy flakes, the kind a local TV meteorologist once described as hamster-sized during a pre-blizzard panic several years ago. For years, he used that description in his forecasts, even the night before, when his forecast was sandwiched into a newscast predicting whether our city would burn for a second night. The snow didn't deter protesters who marched downtown, onto the highways in the shadow of Manifest Destiny's monument on the banks of the Mississippi, because a grand jury failed to charge the white police officer who shot and killed an unarmed black 18-year-old in August. Bobby Sweet killed it on 88.1 that afternoon with a soundtrack for driving through a broken city. An instrumental cover of Mercy, Mercy Me, Marvin Gaye's original Inner City Blues, and then No Means Knows. It's hard to say. All the Little Bourgeois Dreams. An introspection about driving all day to make a living just to go home and watch television like a caged monkey. The day before, a journalist in town for The Verdict commented on how bourgeois I was because I worked in a gourmet shop. I sold Ozark black walnuts for $1 an ounce, and bottles of the liquid gold oil pressed from their... I have new glasses. I'm sorry, I can't see. And bottles of the liquid gold oil pressed from them, packaged in bottles festooned with the international awards they'd won. The same filthy walnuts that used to litter my grandmother's yard, encased in green pods like tennis balls, but smooth, heavy, and hard. Deep inside, a rutted shell that didn't give up nuggets of meat without a hammer and a fight. I'd peeled back the green coats when I was a kid, stained my hands with the black resin inside, made a plaything out of the truffle of the Ozarks. Bourgeois? Maybe. If making $9 an hour to sell $9 a bag nuts, $9 for bagged nuts, made me an elite, fine. I knew I was privileged. One generation removed from a degree of deep Ozark poverty. The photos from my mother's childhood home looked like they were taken in the 1800s, not 65 years earlier. When people in the city were getting their first color televisions, my grandparents were finally bourgeois enough to afford indoor plumbing. My mother kept her childhood outhouse in her garden. As I drove to work in the snow, Bobby talked over the music bed of the Clash's Guns of Brixton before playing Know Your Rights, the song that had looped in my head since August 14th when Michael Brown was murdered and the people started marching against police in military machines. Murder is a crime unless it was done by a policeman. Know your rights. I'd listened to Know Your Rights that morning, trying to ease the residue of hearing Brand New Cadillac in a commercial for a car dealership that aired during last night's news. Maybe some kid somewhere in St. Louis caught the absurdity of selling Cadillacs to people under siege and realized that, in the spirit of the song, the bad guy's behind the wheel. Because the weight was used in a Diet Coke commercial when I was in my early 20s, I learned about the band. The group backed Bob Dylan in the late 1960s and early 1970s while making their own music. Their songs, The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down and The Weight, earned them enough prestige to merit Martin Scorsese documenting their star-studded final concert in the film The Last Waltz on Thanksgiving 1976. Not that I knew that when it happened. I was 4 years old. I first heard The Weight in that commercial, which prompted me to buy their greatest hits CD and fall in love with the brand of music that sounded like home with its early country, with its country overtones. Every year on the night before Thanksgiving, Johnny Vegas and his brother Mark didn't let snow or fire stop them from hosting their tribute to The Last Waltz. Mark and Johnny were two of many, many siblings from an Irish Catholic clan rooted in the inner ring west suburbs of the city. Raised on KSHE 95 Real Rock Radio and Dogma, Weed, and Whippins, the two brothers shared a love of music. Mark got sucked into the band through a VHS copy of The Last Waltz when he was a kid. Johnny got it a few years later when Young MTV would play clips from the film as music videos. Their shared love of the band continued into their adulthoods, where their paths otherwise split. Mark's into a steady job, marriage, family, and Johnny's into booking bands, working in bars, and conducting marriages in South City through the power vested in him by the Universal Life Church. I knew Johnny from years of hanging out at bars and music venues in South City. He was a bartender whose bars always seemed to go out of business shortly after they'd hired him. Officially, we met one night when I staggered out of Off-Broadway and screamed, "Hey, you're Johnny Vegas!" at him across the street. That's really all it took to become friends with Johnny. That night, Johnny met me at the door of 2720 Cherokee and wrapped me in a tight hug. I inhaled his aroma of several varieties of smoke and stag beer, and he planted a kiss on my cheek. "You made it!" That had become the de rigueur reaction when I managed to show up to anything. Months of depression from an unexpected heartbreak sent me into hiding in May. Live music further bruised my heart, and the few shows I had attended left me sobbing. And that was before my city shattered while we watched from the comfort of our living rooms, waiting to see how long Michael Brown's body would roast in the August sun on the asphalt, how big the war machines on South Florissant would be. I had burrowed deeper into my hole. How privileged to be lucky enough to choose to hunker down when 10 miles from my house, Cops in armor stood with their weapons under the Season's Greetings banner that stretched across the street by the Ferguson Police Department. The grand jury's decision to not charge the cop who shot Mike yanked me out by the hair the night before the last waltz. Joining the protesters was out of the question. I couldn't afford to be in jail or injured, not with my 10-year-old kid. I moved through the still quiet club, bought a beer from a bartender on the verge of her 4th trimester of pregnancy, and took a seat by myself near the big window. Cherokee Street, too, was desolate empty, despite it being one of the busiest bar nights of the year. With so much volatility that week, maybe people who came home for the holiday opted to nest with loved ones, or maybe they allowed the news reports to frighten them away. I refused to be frightened by my city. The police were another story, but I had never been afraid of St. Louis. How could I be afraid of a place that housed the people who missed me when I was gone? The people who showed up for a gig despite the governor declaring a state of emergency. The people spanning 7 decades in age who gathered in honor of a moment in 1976 that left a mark on their souls. The bartender trying to earn tip money before the baby came. The club owner just trying to keep the doors open. The more it snowed and the later it got, the more people filed in. Many of them with the same broad nose, curly hair, and angular chins as Johnny and Mark. Their family was rumored to be related to William S. Burroughs, our local patron saint of bad decisions. His sister Miriam brought her new boyfriend, who was flinching and skittish at being among her large and boisterous family for the first time in their young relationship. This is his practice run for tomorrow, before meeting the whole family. She told me before saying that it was good to see me. Levon Helm from the band grew up about 30 miles south of St. Louis in Arkansas. He hunkered down back home in 1966 when the stress of being booed off stage when Dylan went electric became too much. In his memoir, he wrote that he had gone back to the woodshed to decide what to do next. We all need time in the woodshed. I did in 2014 for similar reasons, but on a smaller scale. Bob Dylan went to the woodshed too, around the same time as Levon. It's good to be back, even if it took blatant violent injustice to wake me up and remind me of the good in my city. Over 40 musicians willing to come out and play tribute to a relic despite the snow and the war in our city, because it was good to see each other. 3 hours into the show, enough bodies filled the club to fog the windows. When the locally known King of France threw open the door, a gust of frigid wind entered with him. He slid in on icy cowboy boots, having run the block from his bar just long enough to jump on the stage and wail that the caravan has all his friends. Turn it up, a little bit higher, turn it up. That's enough, so you know it's got soul. Radio, turn it up. Hum la 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 la, la la la. We huddled in front of the stage, singing the words with him, as loud and enthralled as if he was a rock star and not just that guy that owns the whiskey ring, who was playing a little faster than usual because someone had to get back there to pour the drinks. But for 5 minutes, he was the king, saving us from the snow and fire, giving us reason to move on the floor, off the couch, into the city where our caravan would stay parked, even if we needed to go to the woodshed or to march on Florissant Avenue. And that's it. Yeah. This year, we're all in the woodshed. We have all been in the woodshed since March. And I know we're all tired of being in the woodshed, and we're going to be out soon. And when we are, we're all going to sing and dance and be thankful, right? Thanks for humoring me through this. Have a good holiday.